Hello from the Manhattan Project National Historical Park in Oak Ridge. The X-10 Graphite reactor was built in Oak Ridge as the first permanent nuclear reactor. On the morning of November the 4th, 1943, the reactor went critical and started producing plutonium-239. That plutonium was sent to Los Alamos, New Mexico, where it influenced the design of the Fat Man bomb. This logbook reflects the moment criticality was reached. It is on display at the Graphite Reactor on the campus of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Come and see us at Manhattan Project National Historical Park.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Kashif Andrew Graham, and I'm a writer and outreach librarian for religion and theology at Vanderbilt Divinity Library. You can find me on Instagram at KAG Writes. I'm so excited to chat today with Nikky Finney about her newly released book of poems and artifacts, Love Child's Hotbed of Occasional Poetry, which has been published by Northwestern University Press. And if you purchase a copy through Parnassus, a portion of the proceeds will benefit the festival. Nikky Finney was born by the sea in South Carolina and raised during the civil rights, Black Power, and Black arts movements. She is the author of On Wings Made of Gauze, Rice, The World is Round, and Head Off and Split, which won the National Book Award for Poetry in 2011. Thank you for being here, Nikky.
Thank you.
So just two more housekeeping announcements. The Southern Festival of Books remains completely free because of strong community support, and we want to keep it that way. Thank you to our key sponsors, Metro Nashville Arts Commission, Ingram Content Group, Tennessee Arts Commission, Vanderbilt University, and Parnassus Books. You can donate on the web at www.humanitiestennessee.org or via the Southern Festival of Books app. So Nikky's going to read for us, and then we'll move to our Q&A, and you can submit questions for me to ask wherever you are watching. So take it away, Nikky.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kashif, and thank you, Festival, and thank you, readers and listeners alike. I'm honored to be here and can't wait to talk to Kashif about the new book and about writing and life, maybe in general. This is one of the hotbeds in the new collection. I'll explain that when we get to the conversation part. This is Hotbed 49. It's hunting season, and I'm driving Highway 26 across the Congaree River. One exit remains before my exit home. A man is coming toward me, riding against the traffic. He is a man who should not be riding his bicycle in the emergency lane of this dangerous highway, but he is. He rides fast as if he is being chased, but no one is behind him. He rides fast as if he knows he only has a small window of time. He is holding on to the wobbling bike handles with only his right hand. The front legs of a 10-point buck are curled around his right shoulder. The buck's 10-point antlers, his half-closed eyes, open gaping mouth, and dangling tongue are held near the bicyclist's dark brown left cheek. His left arm is locked in place. I slow down as he passes by to be sure I am seeing what I'm really seeing. A Black man on a bright orange bike on a 4-laner with a dead deer splayed across his shoulders like a mink collar. There is blood dripping down his white shirt, but his smile is as wide as the Congaree River. His fast pedaling legs tell me this winter will be different for him. This winter, in his shotgun of a house, there will be meat. I was driving across the bridge and I saw this Black man on a bike and pulled over to just like capture some of the details. And that was a moment that we can talk about it later, but part of a poet's, I don't know, job, responsibility, insight, I think, is to sometimes remind us. I mean, there were 200 other cars on that bridge at that moment. And did people look away, or did they look and go, what in the world? I like the what in the world best.
Yeah.
Part of the theme and the spine of this new book has to do with my father. Part of my return to South Carolina in 2013 had to do with him. He was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I came home to help my mom and family take care of him. And so we were out one day because it looked as if something was changing in him, and we had to go get a swallowing test at the hospital. And I wanted to, I had never seen one before. And my father and I were incredibly close. And I wanted to document that moment because shortly after that, he physically took a turn. And so that moment where we recognized something was happening was a very pivotal one. This is Hotbed 85. His ability to swallow has left Earth. Mama and I are squeezed inside one chair meant for two, inside a tiny room behind the swallowing monitor on the 3rd floor of the hospital. We are being saved from the radiation being used in order to look inside Daddy's throat. A monitor in front of us allows us to see the test as it happens. His swallowing has gotten more difficult these last several weeks. We are here to witness the great swallowing test that will tell all. It is the test that can save him from pneumonia, but also take away the last human pleasure his body will ever know. The test is divided into applesauce, Jell-O, honey, a cracker, a sip of water. Daddy doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't know any of the strangers who are trying to help him. I can feel him feeling lost. The top of my father's spine suddenly pops into the screen. My mother gasps as if she has never seen him this naked. I am watching the full anatomy of Daddy's throat unfold like a movie on the monitor. It is like watching a puppet show. There are so many tiny marionette strings involved. Swallowing has a rhythm and is a production. There is stage right and left. One action releases another action. They want to see if the foods he regularly eats are going down and landing where they should. My eye is on the Jell-O waiting at the top of his tongue, like an Olympic diver on the high board. He looks around the room for anything familiar. I wave so he will know he is not alone. He waves right back when he sees me. Daddy, swallow, swallow. I touch my own throat and make a swallowing motion to try and translate what my words don't seem to be relaying. But the squared red diver on the high board has forgotten all his training, how to tuck and roll his legs, how to leap into the precious air of the esophagus. part of what is going on in some of these hotbeds is I'm translating things that I write in my journal every day, things that are private, into things that are public, or that I want to be public, that I want to have a conversation about, because that's what at the heart of my writing and at the heart of my love for poetry and narration and storytelling is I could write to myself all day long and it's a different world. But when I write in hopes of sharing something, I've got to get the language right for that exchange. And so when I look at the skeleton of it in my journal, I have to think of what it would feel like if I were to do what I just did, which is read it aloud to you, and what would you pick up and what would you remember? And I read this about a week ago, and there was a young man in the audience who said, in the listening audience, who said the exact things happened to his great-great-grandmother. And he was in the room and he realized how something so quotidian, like going to the hospital with a family member, can actually be made into something reverent, and slow it down so that even if you haven't been through it, even if you're not sitting in a chair listening to and looking at this monitor, maybe you will be one day. Maybe it will stay with you in that kind of way. The other thing that happens in Love Child's hotbed of occasional poetry is this thing called the occasional poem. And the occasional poem is a long history of the occasional poem in America and in the world, where you read poems that mark an occasion. They might mark a wedding or a funeral. They might mark some moment in time, but typically they've been thought of as kind of highbrow occasions, right? But as a girl growing up in South Carolina, because I was a girl with a pencil on her ear and a notebook in her back pocket and a love for poetry at a very early age, people began to ask me, see if Nikky can write a poem for Mrs. Robinson's birthday. She's turning 90 on Sunday. And I would say, oh, of course, let me get to work on that, because these are people I adore, people who I treasure. And just like everybody else in the community, Mr. Brown, who was a carpenter, Mr. Singleton, who ran the gas station, I wanted to be known for something. I wanted to make something that would matter to these elders and to these people who were raising me. I wanted to shine, what the song is like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And so my little light as a 13-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as a 10-year-old I was trying to my best. I'm sorry, Ms. Robinson, if I didn't get that right. But I want to get this right, and I want to give it as a gift because I'm working so hard on it. It was probably a terrible poem. I don't know where it is right now. But I was asked by Wofford College they were redoing their main administration building. And I wanted to, they asked me, would I write a poem that would recognize something they had never recognized before. Wofford is in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And the thing they had not recognized was that this building, this beautiful, particularly architecturally stunning building, had been built by enslaved labor. And so they sent me a box of documents that I would read through and then create a poem that would represent this moment historically. And I wanted to do it because the names of these men would never be on this building, but if they wanted to put the poem on the building as a moment of representation. So this will be the last poem I'll read, and then we'll get right into conversation. It's called The Thinking Men. And it has an epigraph because I'm an epigraph queen. I love epigraphs. Tradition has it that the workmen were Negro slaves, but whether that applies to only the common laborers or to skilled workmen, I cannot say. David Duncan Wallace, The History of Wofford College, 1951. More than blue fingers and endless backs, to teach us was against the law. Our math, mind, and muscle could see beyond what they thought they had enslaved. We knew more than we could say. In the middle of a cow field, every heart hammered purpose, nailed a learning floor, poured tower 1 and 2, 100 feet high, arms and legs ballooned and ballet, sweltering in the endless daily march and task, holding close okra soup, waist beads, and the old names from back across the water. Afua, Safia, Fatu, Ihotu, Obafemi, Usman. We slid and nagged odds and augur, laid roof and wall from east to west, all progress, safety pin to weather, 20 pennies, an architect's disposition. We were thinking men. Our hands were living blackboards. A true and readable account is what we wanted left behind. The toil and mission of character planted in the soft stew of oak, dirt, rain, tar, and longleaf pulp. From Kiansi to Kansi, in between the pegging and plugging of labor, a man can sign his name to his grindstone quest with or without budget or permission, with or without quill or lead. A signature can still be minted in vermilion mud. Who he is, the thing done, melded into his own cash and coin, as long as the walls themselves stand tall. This was no simple field fence, some easy throw of dung, sod, and sop meant to keep hog and mountain lion out. We raised this place in the name of the new day coming, how we would one day be counted along with the bright day-to-day blight of life equally wormed out. We carved out these doors and hallways for the long grasp and bright understanding that one day would arrive, realizing all the while that those who entered might not only fish for answer, root and dive for more than heads or tails, but also memorize for the sweet curve and curl of the words themselves. Even if we could not join in the lifelong hunt for any of it ourselves, in every arch and swirl of ruby brick, there is a mix of Bantu and Gambian oil, fingernail and spit, 10 cups of elder chokecherry, blood run along 226 feet and cord. In every whirl of mud, a print of our day-to-day has been made great and permanent. Math, mind, and muscle ply deep into each and every dark seam. The part of us they could see was tethered like a mule's back. The part they could not, our levitation into one whole sky of black and beating wing. It took math and it took muscle, mortise and tendon to build 10 plus recitation rooms, to cut chapel 48 by 80, laboratory, office, and one museum 30 by 37. I stood many a day in the shadow of the next day coming, just before the big bell had finished sounding, just after the shout to line up and circle up, testing my mind against the tired muscle of my spine, walking the plank before myself, thinking plain and in the loud with reaching outstretched hands. Once done, I would bow to the eyes of that nearly finished room where I had cut the floor, windows, through myself, making certain with rule and plane that the good sun could bounce here, there, and high enough to reach the precious printed page. This light and learning floor was the way forward through the wilderness. Why else keep it from us with such force and might? They would like us to believe that some men are born to read and turn the pages, while other men are born to walk on nails and turn the earth. Our hands were living blackboards, math, mind, and muscle, the long-drawn drudgery of thinking men left behind for good. Here, in every wall, all this, I tell you, can leave a clear mark upon a world. Thank you.
Wow. I just snaps. Oh, I mean, just incredible.
Thank you so much.
Incredible. I mean, the line there's so many lines that stood out to me, but the part of us that they could not see.
Yes.
And the ways in which sometimes, I think about their lives, the lives of my enslaved ancestors, and the ways in which people assumed that they were all, what I can see is all you are, but
exactly.
The part of us that they could not see.
I mean, when you see this building, Kashif, it is so pristine. The math you have to know, where to put the brick, where to line. There's nothing, the angles are it's a stunning representation of what thinking people make. We walked out of slavery and took things that we had a mind to invent and walked to Washington, D.C. to the patent office. What were we doing? This wasn't because we went to school. This is because we were thinking people.
Yes.
Always. And whether you wanted to give us the total percentage of our humanity by saying we were 3/5 or 2/5 or whatever, we understood our history and what we had come from, and it did not start with slavery.
Right. Which is critical. Critical because there is an implicit, sort of education that Black history in America starts with. But what about before?
Right. Exactly. There was no before.
We have to question these things, and I think that poetry is a way to open out and say, "Hey, there's something that's going on here that isn't necessarily the case," and we have to question that.
We have to.
I think I just want to go back to the hotbed for a second here before I get to my other questions.
Okay.
Talk about, because when I was going through this, I was thinking, I experienced the hotbeds, at least the way in which the book is structured. It reminded me of smelling colognes, for lack of a better example. And in between, you have maybe a pan of espresso beans, or if you're having a fine meal and you have these little sort of sorbet. People say that they're palate cleansers, but the hotbeds are not quite, they're the opposite. They're another sort of flavor. Can you talk about the creation of the hotbed and the function in this collection?
Well, I need to sit here and think about that. What you just gave me was this amazing sort of like, is he talking about like getting your eye aroma, your senses ready for the coming of the poem? I like that.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
I'm going to use that.
Okay, go ahead.
But you're right. I mean, this is not a linear book. This is a book of ephemera. My father's writing. My father's handwriting is on the cover of the book. They surprised me and did that and made me cry. My father passed away in 2017.
Right.
And I pulled the book that I thought I was going to create because I realized how deeply I wanted him to be present in this book. And so I took all the poems out and took all the hotbeds out. And there, in the initial book, there were no photographs. There were no images. And there were just hotbeds and there were just the poems. And I thought, well, this is cool. This is good. And then I thought, wait a minute. I have another idea. And it was because I was missing him so much.
Yeah.
In the last year of his life, he lost the ability to talk. which was the swallowing test moment, right? And so I went home one day and I took out all his letters, and there must be 500 of them that I have kept because I'm a pack rat in that way. And so I was just reading them and I thought, wow, these stretch back to when I first left home and before I left home. And I thought, what if I could include some of this to talk about the unveiling that I felt this book doing about me as a poet at this moment in my life. Yeah. And so it added so much dimension. So the hotbeds came directly out of the journals that I have kept since I was 10. I have like 179 numbered on the spine journal books. Here's one. Wow. This is 138. And so I would go through these journals and I would pull passages that had that aroma that you're talking about, had that sensual whirl in it. Yeah. And I would say, okay, how does this work with some of the poems that I had put in the book? And so I would place them based on what that poem needed to open it up a little bit more, or to prepare the reader in a way for what I was getting ready to say in the poem. And so they have been edited. The piece in the journal is, for me, and the piece that I wanted to edit in a strong way and craft went through, what the poems went through, basically. So hopefully when you read, it's a very slow book, and I love that. I love that it slows you down. It makes you aware of the natural world. Hopefully, it makes you aware of how interconnected we are with it and with each other. And it's a book about all my loves, all the things that I love and all the things that have loved on me to get me to this moment. And I don't know, I'm really proud of it. I love it.
That's incredible. And listening to you, that's so validating to me as a burgeoning writer, as they always say. But because I'm also, I'm sort of a copious journaler, if you will, and I have an e-journal. But I have found there are sort of ways in which you're journaling through what's going on in your life, and then you flow into something that you're writing it and you go, this is for more than just me, but let me just write it here and lock it away, but it won't be locked away forever. And that was so validating to hear that, because I've been working on things where I'm like, wait a minute, at some point I plan to translate. I love you talk about the translation. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that process of translation? Like, was it, because I imagine it was not merely about, anonymizing names and things, but it was about, what was that process like?
Yeah, so the more specific a writer is, in my estimation, the more, people sometimes say that the more specific you are, you lose an audience, right? Because you're being so specific. This is like my father and the way he loved me, and the way he rode me around in that Buick Deuce and a Quarter. I'm in the back window looking up at magnolia trees and black swans on the lake. But in the specificity of that, I feel I do this. I feel the enlargement of the world, not the smalling of the world, right? And so at first I was worried that it would be too memoir-ish. It would have too much about, and then I was like, no, this is about the human experience. I have to get that off my shoulder, that my experience is not the human experience. Wait, where did I get that from?
Come on, send to yourself. Yeah, exactly.
It was about making those moments where, like, for instance, one of the moments is me as a little girl. My father picks me up from school and he goes, "You want to go to the place?" And I go, "Yeah." And it's a place called Swan Lake in Sumter, South Carolina. And then you could drive around and you could look up at these 200-year-old trees and these black swans out on the water. And so the only thing he drove was Buicks. He had 20 Buick cars in his life, and they all had these big back windows, whereas when I was a little girl, I would just lay prone, eyes up, and I would look at the natural world. He was teaching me to validate and value what I saw.
Yeah.
He would say, going 20 miles per hour, okay, baby, what you see? What do you see? And I would say, oh, I see a bluebird on that limb, Daddy. And over there's a big magnolia blossom. And he would just listen. He knew, he called me Love Child. That's where the book gets its name. And this was such an embarrassing name for me when I was a little girl. I was like, oh, Love Child, okay. But what he was teaching me was that I want you to know your name that I have given you, because people in the world are going to call you other names.
Come on now. Come on.
And I do not want you to answer to those names. I want you to answer to this name. And I want you to remember that you are made of love. Mm-hmm. You have come through the love, connection. Yeah. Yes, slavery was involved. But all before, during, and after, there's a river of love running through you.
Yeah.
Do not let them take that from you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. It's incredible. And that gets at one of the questions I was, going to talk about a little bit later on. But even when he says, if you had not been born to us, I would still be looking for you. And just the ways in which it was like he was embracing you as a Black girl wonder. I had to stop at that line. If you had not been born to us, I would still be looking for you.
That's
incredible.
For you to pull that line up, that is the line that convinced me, stopped me, and said, I have to put some of this in the book.
Yeah.
Because, and you know what has happened? People who have read the book have contacted me and said, my father, I was really close to my father too. And he wrote me little notes. There's a friend who was in graduate school, and she said, my father would bring me cheeseburgers by, and he would put a little note in the bag, and he would say, you got this, baby. You can do this. And she said, I don't have the note anymore. I said, yes, you do.
You
have it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just because I'm the pack rat, I just want you to remember these moments that mark you.
Yeah. That's so good. And I think that's a good message for all of our listeners that are probably wondering the same thing. What do I do when I don't have the physical evidence? But you do, because it lives in the cinema of your mind. As Baldwin would say, the cinema of my mind.
Yes.
That is so succinct and so wonderful. Yeah. And I will go for a second to go back to that when you were talking about your father and your experience. But as I was reading that, I was spirited back to my father driving the church van, and how I would lay back on the back seat after he had dropped everyone off and look up and see New York and look up and look at the buildings going by. Yeah.
You have to write that.
I am going to, actually. Thank you. I am going to write that.
You must.
Yeah. I never have. I forgot about it until I was working through that. And I thought, wait a minute, why does this seem so familiar to me? There we go. And I was taken back, and the sense of safety in that big van, and it was just my father and I could see all of the world, and nothing could hurt me because Daddy was there, And the thing about it is that never leaves you. And I think there's a way in which, this ties into the last artifact that appears in the book, which is that brief letter that was written to you by the participant in your writing workshop at Xavier University in 1999. I mean, the line that stood out, there were two lines that stood out to me, but the first one was, you showed me love like my own mother. And then later on, this statement that I want everybody to lean into. Most human beings make the fatal mistake of assuming that one needs less love as they get older. The fatal mistake, because I think that you wither without that kind of connection. And, my friends and I have been talking a lot about holding each other physically and spiritually. I'm journaling through and writing about love beyond sex, love beyond the ways in which, I'm fascinated by this idea of people holding each other. They may be perfect strangers, and I'm thinking about their bodies like, I wrote today, moon-shaped crescents, that they're just holding each other. And I wanted to ask you about holding each other and navigating loneliness as adults, and that the sense of love and protection that we still need from our parents. And I just wanted to know, can you talk about that for a second?
Well, because I am 2 inches from being a hermit, I love solitude.
Yeah.
And I find that all of the ways that I feel give me access to the human board that I want to understand deeper, right?
Yeah.
Even my loneliness.
Yeah.
My loneliness makes me put on some Abby Lincoln or go to YouTube and listen to James Baldwin. And so what's empty needs to have a little filling, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But my loneliness is human.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't look at it as I look at it as what's going on? What do you need to like put your finger on? Who do you need to reach out to? It's like a red light, green light, yellow light, caution light moment.
Yeah.
That is just reminding me that I'm human. If I'm always up, that's something is, that's not real. That's not real.
Right.
So loneliness is in the pantheon for me of all my feelings.
Yeah.
My job is to take my 5'11" self outside with my mask on and take a walk.
Yeah.
And look at the trees and say hello to somebody, because I'm inside, right? I'm inside by myself, or I'm inside working, for the most part. And it is my job to recognize something is going on, and I need to work on it.
Well, and I've been trying. So what I'm hearing from you is sometimes using loneliness as an indicator to stop and say, okay, my friends and I do this. We call this the big T. Stop for a second. What do I need to do? I love that. Who do I need to reach out to? And the thing is, I think as writers, as poets, as creatives, I know that there are times in which we need to lean in and go towards that. And some of what we will come to understand about the human experience is from loneliness, when we sort of go away. I can't help but thinking about the New Testament and Jesus in the garden. But my question has always been, what happens when you come out of the garden and you're looking for the people? Like, somebody needs to know where to find you. There still is. And so I'm trying to strike that balance, I guess.
It is a balance.
I'm in the valley, or experiencing that loneliness in order to write, because now I have clarity when it's just me.
Right.
And then the love and the sense of connection, which I think this participant got from you when you're in community. And there's a lot to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. But love is at the center of it.
Yeah.
And that piece, that little short 6-line, perfectly written, punctuated, grammatically perfect note to me that has his name taken out because I couldn't find him and I couldn't get permission to use it. But I asked the universe because that note and the message had to be there, because again, this is about all the loves of my life. And I've had his note over my desk since 1999. Because I never want to be less than that when I'm in a workshop, or when I'm a teacher, or when I'm a friend, or in any relationship I'm in. I want to be right there. I want to remind myself of how you can touch somebody and how that touch can matter.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even as I was thinking about and going through that letter, because that struck me, which is, even as I was thinking about what I wanted to ask you, I started at the end, because I felt that washed over the entire work, that it was all about love and holding and connection. And the beautiful thing is, you're holding someone, but you're not holding them down. you're holding them, but then the love that they experience from you, whether it's the physical holding, whether it's the sense of, I share my words with you, I give you my words, and my words are me, and you can carry them. And you as a workshop instructor love my words and therefore love me. And so I experience that, and I experience the holding, but I become freer. So I'm being held, but I'm freed and beautiful, which is what the rest of the letter goes on to say. And I guess I was also wanted to ask, how is it that love makes us free and beautiful?
Well, what I think the person in this letter is saying to me, that I feel like he said to me, over the past 30 years, over and over again, is I basically took the time to listen to him and took the time to see him, and it wasn't that I maybe even said anything complimentary. I don't know. I don't remember what I said to him. When I got the note at the end of the week-long workshop, I had to sit down because I couldn't there had been so many moments. But I think that in this moment that we are in right now as human beings, one of the things that we have to recognize is that we need each other. We need each other in ways that we've always needed each other, but we need to step up to each other and for each other. And we need to cross some lines that people have told us we can't cross. We can't, white people can't stand up for Black people, and straight people can't stand up for, oh, that's too confusing. That's not confusing. This is the human, populace needing each other in monumental ways, to recognize and to say, you okay? You got a poem? You wrote something? And especially because we're not touching each other. We're walking around with masks on. And so right now we need artists, we need poets, we need, people in, graduate school to get out of their bubble, we have to be in the bubble, but to come out, like an octopus, send your arm out to touch somebody out in that other realm, because we all in this ocean together. And so that is what I love about that note that he reminded me of so beautifully.
I think that is incredible. And that I'm thinking back to even a thing that I think, look at me now trying to pretend it's not a poem. It's a little bitty poem in front of Nikky Finney. I think that I wrote, but I was saying in this hour, go get the tribe of poets, call them back from the desert streams, from the city gates, call them back. Because before, I think, now is the time for poetry is what I was trying to say.
But Kashif, you've already called James Baldwin's name. What did Jimmy B say? Jimmy said, the poets always know. And when he said poets, he wasn't talking about just people who deal with words. Right. He's talking about artists, people who stretch the definitions of things, people who pay attention to the N words, who pay attention to that streak of yellow in the middle of that painting, who chisel wood until the big African beautiful nose pops out. We need them because they are the ones who understand what it means to be human. Yeah. What did Jimmy say? What it means to die, what it means to love, what it means to fight for your family and your people to the death. The poets know that because that is what we write about. That is what we draw. That is what we care about. Yeah. So go to the poets, the ones who are out there on the front lines, trying to take in our humanity and to hold it close and to also hand it back to us.
Yes.
And everything else is being taken away. So
that is incredible. I think in this time of sitting with self, this is all for, I think, a lot of people, this is what's coming up. And especially as you said before, you can't see people in the same way. You can't touch them. And now you're sort of back in another dimension. You have to say, okay, what do I really value? And I think that poetry helps us to gives words to the thing. I mean, I talk about this experience from, growing up in church and in the Pentecostal church, and the people just before they would start speaking in other tongues and having this experience, they would say you had stammering lips you couldn't get the stuff out. But the poet comes in with a word for you, and you go, there it is. That's my experience. There it is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I'm so afraid that we have run out of time. No! But this was such a wonderful session. Thank you so much, Nikky, for being here. And thank you. This concludes our session. Everybody give Nikky a virtual round of applause. Thank you so much.
Kashif, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.